The financial aid office was on the third floor. I had walked past it 4 times a year for 4 years. On the way to the elevator, on the way to the dean's office, on the way to every administrative appointment that required navigating a building I had never fully learned. I had never gone inside. I went inside 3 years after graduation. Not looking for trouble, looking for records. I was applying for a graduate program that required documentation of my undergraduate financial aid package, and I needed the official summary. The woman at the desk was efficient and pleasant. She pulled my file. She slid a single page across the counter. I looked at the numbers. The scholarship had covered everything: tuition, housing, meal plan, a small stipend for books and incidentals. 4 years, full coverage, $116,000 in total aid, every dollar of which had been dispersed directly to my account on file with the university. I said, "What account was on file?" She checked. She said, "A checking account ending in 4471. Would you like the full account number?" I wrote it down. I walked to my car. I sat in the parking garage for 20 minutes. The account ending in 4471 was not my account. I had never had an account ending in 4471. I knew this with certainty because my first bank account, the one I had opened at 17 with my first paycheck, ended in 8823. I had never changed banks. I still had that account. The account on file with my university was my mother's account. 4 years of scholarship money. $116,000. Dispersed to my mother's checking account. While I graduated with $31,000 in student loans, I drove home. I called my attorney. "My name is Jasmine Carter. I am 24 years old. I grew up in Chicago on the South Side in a household that was stable in the ways that mattered and stretched in the ways that were always visible. My mother worked 2 jobs for most of my childhood. My father worked construction and was present and loving and chronically underemployed in the specific way that the construction industry produces when the market goes quiet. I was a good student, not good in the way that came easily, good in the way that came from the library after school and the kitchen table after dinner, and the specific determination of a child who understood early that the path out of stretched was through the door marked education. I applied to 11 universities. I was accepted to 7. I chose Northwestern because it offered the best financial aid package, a full merit scholarship covering tuition, housing, meal plan, and a stipend. Full. That was the word they used in the award letter. Full scholarship. My parents had been in the room when I opened the email. My mother had cried. My father had lifted me off the ground, even though I was 17 and had not been lifted off the ground in years. I thought we were celebrating the same thing. I did not know until 3 years after graduation that we had not been. I want to tell you what those 4 years looked like from the inside. I worked. Not because I wanted to, because I believed I had to. The scholarship covered tuition and housing and the meal plan, but there were other costs. Books, transportation, the laptop that died in my junior year, the professional clothing required for internship interviews, the specific costs of being a college student that no scholarship line item fully accounts for. My parents helped when they could, not consistently, when they could, which meant some months yes and some months no, and a general atmosphere of financial precarity that I had assumed was the natural condition of a scholarship student whose family did not have extra. I also had loans, not large ones, or so I thought. A federal loan in my freshman year when the costs seemed to exceed what I could manage, another in my sophomore year, a third in my junior year, $31,000 by graduation. I had accepted this as the cost of the education. I had graduated with gratitude and a degree and a debt I considered reasonable, given what I had been given. What I had been given was $116,000 in scholarship funds deposited into my mother's checking account over 4 years while I took out $31,000 in loans. I did not know this until the financial aid office on the third floor. I did not know it until the parking garage. The account ending in 4471 had been on file with Northwestern since before my enrollment began. I know this because I requested the full account of every disbursement in a formal records request that my attorney helped me file 3 weeks after the parking garage. The disbursements were documented, 8 per year, 2 per semester, tuition and living stipend disbursed separately, 32 disbursements across 4 years, each one transferred to the account ending in 4471 on the first day of each month of the academic calendar. My attorney, a woman named Michelle, who I had originally consulted on an unrelated matter, reviewed the disbursement records and the account verification. Michelle said, "Jasmine, who set up the account on file with the university?" I said, "I don't know. I was 17 when I enrolled. My parents helped me with the paperwork." Michelle said, "The enrollment financial aid forms require a disbursement account to be designated by the student. The student's signature is required." I said, "I signed a lot of forms when I enrolled. I was 17. I didn't read all of them." Michelle was quiet for a moment. She said, "The disbursement form designating the account ending in 4471 has your signature on it." I said, "Can I see it?" She sent me the scan. The signature was mine. Not forged, mine. My actual handwriting, recognizable to me. On a form I had signed at 17 in a stack of enrollment documents while my mother sat beside me pointing to each signature line and saying, "Sign here, here, and here." I had signed here, here, and here. I had signed a disbursement form designating my mother's checking account to receive 4 years of scholarship funds. I had signed it at 17 without reading it because my mother was sitting beside me and she was pointing to the lines and I trusted her. If you have ever signed something at the direction of someone you trusted and found out years later what you had signed, you already know why this story exists. Subscribe and hit the bell. I'll be here every week. My mother's name is Denise. She is 53 years old. I want to tell you about her before I tell you about the conversation, because the conversation requires context that the account number alone does not provide. My mother worked 2 jobs for most of my childhood. She cleaned office buildings in the evenings and processed insurance claims during the day. She was never absent, never neglectful, never anything other than a woman working as hard as she could in conditions that did not always work in her favor. She also had debt. I knew this in the vague way that children know things about their parents' finances, from overheard phone calls, from the specific tension that arrived with certain envelopes, from the times when the answer to "can we" was "not yet" instead of "yes." What I did not know until after the parking garage, after Michelle, after the disbursement records, was the specific shape of that debt. I found out because Michelle asked me to find out. She said, "Jasmine, before we decide what to do, I need to understand what happened to the money, because that determines what options are available to you." I asked my mother directly. I said, "Mom, I need to talk to you about the Northwestern account." She went very still. I said, "I pulled my financial aid records. The scholarship was deposited into your checking account for 4 years. All of it. I need you to tell me what happened to it." A long silence. My mother said, "I used it." I said, "For what?" She said, "For everything. The house, the car, the debt that was going to take the house if I didn't pay it, your father's medical bills in your sophomore year, the things that were going to collapse if I didn't have something to hold them up." I said, "Mom, I have $31,000 in student loans." She said, "I know." I said, "I took out loans because I thought the scholarship wasn't covering everything." She said, "I know." I said, "You were receiving the scholarship. You knew it was covering everything." She said, "Jasmine." I said, "I want to understand something. Did you plan this before I enrolled?" A very long silence. My mother said, "I needed something to hold the house up. I thought you would be okay. You were always okay." That sentence, "You were always okay." The family's accounting of who could absorb cost and who needed protection. The same accounting I had seen in other families. The child who managed becoming the child who funded without being asked, without being told, without knowing. I looked at my mother. I said, "I was always okay because I didn't know what was happening." She did not answer. If this moment stayed with you, leave me a comment. Have you ever found out that your being okay had a cost someone else decided you could afford to pay without asking you? Tell me. I read every single one. Michelle presented my options in her office on a Friday afternoon. The first option, pursue full recovery. File a civil claim against my mother for the $116,000 dispersed to her account, offset by the documented legitimate expenses she could demonstrate had benefited me or the family during my enrollment. Likely outcome? A judgment in my favor, practically unenforceable because my mother had no assets sufficient to satisfy it. The second option, pursue partial recovery. Document the $31,000 in student loan debt as the specific harm, the amount I borrowed that I would not have borrowed had I known the scholarship was being deposited elsewhere. Request repayment of that amount on a structured timeline, backed by a formal agreement. The third option, pursue nothing legally. Have the conversation. Accept what had happened. Decide what the relationship was worth and whether legal action served that relationship or ended it. Michelle said, "Jasmine, these are your options, and only you can decide which one fits. What I can tell you is that option 2 has the clearest legal basis and the most realistic path to actual recovery. Option 1 is technically stronger, but practically weaker. Option 3 is entirely valid if your priority is the relationship." I sat with all three for 2 weeks. I thought about my mother cleaning office buildings in the evenings. I thought about the phone calls and the envelopes and the specific tension of a household holding itself together by will and creative accounting. I also thought about $31,000 in loans I had taken because I thought I needed to. About 4 years of working campus jobs and stressing about book costs and wearing the same 3 interview outfits because I could not afford a fourth. I thought about being 17 and signing here, here, and here. I chose option 2. Not because I forgave what had happened. I am still working on what forgiveness looks like here, and I do not expect it to be simple. Because option 2 addressed the specific and documentable harm without requiring a legal war against a woman who had been trying, in her specific flawed way, to hold a family together. My mother signed a repayment agreement, $31,000, $300 a month for approximately 9 years. The first payment arrived last month. On time. I am 24 years old and I graduated from Northwestern University with $31,000 in student debt from a scholarship that had fully covered my education. The first thing? Read every document before you sign it. I was 17. My mother was pointing to signature lines. I signed without reading. I signed away 4 years of scholarship funds, and I signed them into an account I could not access, and I did not know this for 7 years. I am not telling you that what happened was my fault. What happened was not my fault. I am telling you that a signature on a document creates a legal reality, regardless of whether the person signing it understood what they were signing. Read the document. Ask what it does. Ask what account is being designated. Ask what the money goes to and when and under what conditions. If the answer is, "It's fine, just sign here," that is not an answer. That is a direction to stop asking. Ask anyway. The second thing is about the specific harm of being the one who is always okay. My mother looked at me at 17 and made a calculation. Jasmine will be okay. Jasmine is going to Northwestern on a full scholarship. Jasmine can afford to absorb this because she is going somewhere and she will figure it out. I did figure it out. I graduated. I got a job. I have a career. I also have $31,000 in loans that I took because I thought I had to. I have 4 years of campus jobs and budget stress and deferred costs that I paid while my scholarship sat in an account I did not know existed. Being okay is not the same as not needing anything. The people in your life who are always okay are often okay because they absorb costs without complaining. The absorption has limits. Sometimes you find those limits in a financial aid office on the third floor. The third thing is the hardest. My mother held our family together for my entire childhood with 2 jobs and creative accounting and the specific determination of a woman who refused to let things collapse. She used my scholarship to hold it together during the 4 years I was at Northwestern. She used it without telling me, and she let me take out loans that she knew I did not need. Both of these things are true simultaneously. The love was real, and the harm was real, and they do not cancel each other out. I am finding my way through the space between them. It is not a clean space. It does not resolve into a lesson. It is just where I am. Hi everyone, thank you for being here. Tell me in the comments, have you ever found out that being the one who was always okay had a cost that someone else decided you could pay without asking you? And which moment stayed with you longer? The account number in the parking garage, or your mother saying, "You were always okay"? I read every single one. If this story reached you today, subscribe. What comes next will stay with you too.